Originally, the video you're seeing was going to be Grab Bag Episode 3, but as you could probably guess from the title of this video, I changed my mind. Deal with it. Before we begin, a couple corrections and a housekeeping note. I know I'm supposed to do the record scratch and do it in the intro, but not this time. Again, deal with it. I briefly mentioned in a previous video that Canadian railroads use a uniform set of signal rules, and this is correct in Canada. CP and CN both use a separate set of rules for their US trackage, and I know CN has an entire different rulebook for US operations. CP uses G-Core while CN uses something? I'm not really sure. They use a speed signal system similar to NORAC, but they are not a member of it. Finally, nearly all CN train symbol information here is provided by the Railroadfan.com CN train location updates forum post. CN uses train symbols when dispatch is contacting a train, but very rarely otherwise. Anyway, in July, I spent a week in the capital region of Michigan. I would be based out of Lansing, which is situated on two historic railroads. The Grand Trunk Western main line from Canada to Chicago crosses into Michigan at Port Huron and travels through Flint, Lansing, and Battle Creek, then crosses in Indiana and goes through South Bend and Valparaiso en route to Chicago. CN no longer controls the original Grand Trunk line into Chicago, the Elsdon sub, as it was turned over to CSX, who had trackage rights over it. Mileposts on this line are measured from the former Western Terminus, Dearborn Station in Chicago. The Grand Trunk Western was the American extension of the Canadian Grand Trunk Railway and was the result of combining several short lines to create a single line from Chicago to Canada. When the government of Canada pulled a Conrail 50 years before it was cool and combined several insolvent railroads, including the Grand Trunk, into the government-owned Canadian National in 1923, the Grand Trunk Western became a subsidiary. The Grand Trunk Corporation would be created in 1971 to act as a holding company for all CN acquisitions in the U.S., and at this time the GTW adopted its now famous blue and red-orange paint scheme to differentiate itself from the parent CN. CN would begin phasing out individual branding on its subsidiaries in the 90s as part of CN North America, and although the GTW still exists today on paper, you have to search for any GTW branding actually out in the field. Also running through Lansing is the former Pierre Marquette line from Detroit to Grand Rapids, then turning south and running along Lake Michigan through Holland, South Haven, Benton Harbor, and New Buffalo, with most trains using the former Baltimore and Ohio trackage to enter Chicagoland. Pierre Marquette would be taken over by the Chesapeake and Ohio in 1929 after a merger with the Nickel Plate, Erie, and C&O was rejected by regulators. It would be officially merged into the C&O in 1947, and the Chessie system, as it was known after 1973, would merge into CSX Transportation, a renamed Seaboard system, in 1987. This line was once a priority as Canadian Pacific had trackage rights over it from northwestern Indiana to Detroit, but CP has since moved virtually all their trains onto the Norfolk Southern's former New York Central Chicago line. More on this one later. Traffic is very limited. However, this line is still a holdout on modernization. Although CTC is installed on most of the line, you can still find plenty of searchlights and code lines standing tall. I can't confirm this, but I've read these signals date from not long after the C&O took control of the Pierre Marquette, and if this is the case, they were likely installed in the early 1930s. Amtrak also owns former Michigan Central trackage that parallels I-94 through Kalamazoo, Battle Creek, and Jackson, but with Jackson being 45 minutes south, I won't be spending any time here. It is, however, one of the corridors that has received improvements, and Amtrak is authorized for 110 miles an hour on stretches of that line. We start our railfanning on the campus of Michigan State University, Bogue Street, milepost 225, on the CN Flint sub. A half mile to the west, we can see a pair of intermediate signals, which most of their time are at approach. The next set of signals to the east are absolutes at Okemos, where this stretch of two main tracks ends. I caught a westbound stack train, but apparently forgot how to use a video camera and got no video of it. This is Q12311, which was just recently created and runs from Halifax, Nova Scotia to Chicago, most likely Homewood. Like I said, no video, but here's a picture of it. It really happened. See? A day later, I went for take 2, and this time our target was Amtrak 364, the eastbound Blue Water from Chicago to Port Huron. The challenge here is the arrival time. It is scheduled to depart East Lansing at 9 p.m. I see on ATCS monitor that something is following Amtrak, but by the time I get from the hotel to my spot, I completely forget about it. I set up the camera, and this time I know I'm not going to miss it. 364 activates the detector at milepost 219.5.
CN detector, mile 219.5. Eastbound, no defects. Temperature 84 F. Total axles 32. Speed 4. Detector out.
And pulls into East Lansing.
X364 now arriving East Lansing, clear Trover.
One of the microphones has a little bit of a problem.
Yeah, that was, I didn't understand not one word of that. I can't understand you guys at all. I don't know what is going on. Stop talking because I can't understand.
It actually arrives early but can't leave until 9 and does so right on time.
Amtrak 364, okay to park East Lansing. Delayed the boss, came in unclear.
Here we go, Amtrak 364 departing East Lansing on a clear DM.
364 is a mostly horizon run with a single Amfleet Cafe car, sandwiched by two State of Illinois-owned SC-44 Chargers.
Here we go back on a clear 225 with no restrictions.
You're on the clear at 225, no restrictions. And how do I sound now in the vestibule? Okay, it's definitely the mic. That stop coming into Durand and we'll make sure.
As I said, I completely forgot about the second train, which, because I had forgotten to bring a radio with me, I didn't hear activate the detector.
CN detector, mile 219.5. Eastbound, no defects. Temperature 82 F. Total axles 404. Speed 28. Detector out.
But the radio in the car heard it just fine. I was at the car putting all my video equipment away and heard a horn to the east, at which point I took the only thing I still had out, my still camera, and sprinted back to the crossing. It was a slow-rolling eastbound manifest, A45061 from Battle Creek to Flat Rock, that was running about a signal block behind Amtrak. Although this train is symboled as a manifest, and is, today it was a long string of steel cars and an even longer string of empty auto racks with a mixed bag of cars in between. By the time it reached the signal, it would actually have an advance approach and a 2-block gap. Again, no video. Whoops. As I was leaving, I could hear CSX L305 approaching Trowbridge, where the two lines cross, but I didn't see it, and even if I did, it was just too dark to shoot anymore. A couple days later, I take the short trek from Lansing to Durand. Durand Union Station is a beautifully restored station that once served both the Grand Trunk Western and the Ann Arbor Railroad. The Ann Arbor would be passed between several railroads, but from Durand south is now the CN Holly sub, which hosts Amtrak south of Pontiac. North of Durand, it's an interchange yard, and beyond that, it is owned by the Huron and Eastern. The star of the show here is the CN Flint sub, although if you're expecting traffic levels like Rochelle or even the NS Chicago line further to the south, you'll be disappointed. CN averages about a train per hour through here, with peaks in the morning and evening and lulls in between. What Durand lacks in traffic volume, it makes up for in accessibility. You can get right up to both lines with only a short fence. Photography is absolutely no problem here. We're at milepost 253.3 on the Flint sub and 67 on the Holly sub. There are defect detectors 9 miles west, 4 miles east, and 11 miles south. There are wide tracks in 3 of the quadrants, only the west quadrant doesn't have one. We arrived about 12:15 p.m. As we arrive, a set of 3 locomotives get clearance from the Flint sub to take the eastern connector, known as the High Y, onto the Holly sub. It will then get a signal to cross the diamond and pick up a string of grain hoppers. This is actually a reverse movement, and a conductor stands on the back steps to call out signals and distance. These engines have come from Flint Yard, about 10 miles east, and will become G82561, which is hard to find details for, but I believe is heading to Wisconsin Rapids, Wisconsin. Not long after the light engines reach the yard, a westbound manifest gets a light on Main 1. M39931 from McMillan Yard in Toronto to interchange with the UP at Salem, Illinois. It hits the detector at 257.1 and it's a monster.
CN detector, mile 257.1. West found, no defects. Temperature 86F. Total axles 662. Speed 36. Detector out.
This train has 3 locomotives with 6 axles each. Regular freight cars have 4 axles. Do the math. This train is 161 cars long with no DPUs. CN 2933 has picked up its train set and is ready to pull back across to the Holly sub. It will pull far enough to clear the high Y, the conductor will walk to the rear, and the train will pull backwards onto the Flint sub. These cars are all leased to Parrish and Heimbecker, a Canadian grain company, and are likely empties, but I don't know this.
I'm showing contest passed at arms, some 78 pounds up here. In 2933.
Roger, showing 78. I'm on the point. We have a slow approach at Durand. Okay, back. First crossing should be protected by Derek, but we'll just take them slow, over.
Hey, conductor reports cleared on the point, slow approach Durand. Started back easy. Transportation manager's got the first crossing protected, CN 2933, over.
And 2933, give you 10 to a crossing, over. Right. And more, CN 2933. 2933, crossing gates are lower, traffic is stopped, keep them coming, good for another 50, over. Right. And 2933, 30 to a crossing, and I'll give you 32 to a stop, over.
Crossing 32 to a stop. 2933.
Right.
Once the conductor reaches the head end again, they get the light on Main 2 and head west.
2933, I'm off and in the clear. Rule 503, shove back, over.
2933, conductor off and clear. Show back on Rule 503, permission, over.
Right.
On the way back home, I wanted to take just a little time along the NS Chicago line. This extremely busy stretch of railroad was part of the Lakeshore and Michigan Southern, a New York Central affiliate. It would become part of Penn Central in 1968, at which point pieces closer to Chicago were abandoned in favor of the Pennsylvania's Fort Wayne line. It became part of Conrail in 1976. When Conrail was split in 1999, Norfolk Southern got most of the former New York Central, while CSX got most of the former Pennsylvania. NS got the entire Chicago line, including the former Pennsylvania trackage near Chicago, while CSX got the former Pennsylvania Fort Wayne line that had been continually downgraded and was eventually sold to the Chicago, Fort Wayne, and Eastern. Amtrak's Capital Limited and Lakeshore Limited used the line. The westbound trains 29 and 49 arrive here in the morning, 7:29 and 8:43, while the eastbound 30 and 48 arrive at night, 9:29 p.m. and 12:24 a.m. I had been to Elkhart once before, about 9 years ago. I went with a group to the National New York Central Museum. The museum itself is relatively small, but does a great job at telling the story of the New York Central. Word of caution, you may find references to a train-watching platform here. This is gone now. It was actually just an old flat car, and the wood rotted out and wasn't replaced, according to a worker at the museum. You can still watch trains from the grounds here, but it's a little weird because the tracks are actually higher than you, and the perspective isn't really the best. There's also a tall chain-link fence that makes up-close photography a problem. There is, however, an old E8 that you can climb up in and explore, as well as a small collection of other rolling stock, including a Penn Central GG1, and a sizable model railroad layout inside. Although the museum is small, it packs a lot in a small area and is worth the $6 admission. After the museum, we headed across to the depot. At one time, the New York Central split here. The original main line ran from Elkhart northeast into Michigan and reached Toledo. Almost all traffic would be rerouted via the now Chicago line when it was completed. Parts of the old road have been abandoned, with the rest sold off to short lines. Just east of the station, the Grand Elk Railroad runs for about 17.5 miles over the old main line, while the triple-track Chicago line turns to the right and the southeast. Just west of the station is Elkhart Yard, built in 1956, relatively late in the New York Central's life. It would go to Penn Central, then Conrail, and now Norfolk Southern, just like the line. The yard itself is too far to see from the station, but the end of the yard leads are visible. A large gravel area between the depot and the platform gives a hint of just how many tracks used to run through here. A few years ago, the tracks were reconfigured and the platform relocated where it is now. We're at mile 421.65, also known as CP 421. Mileposts on here are measured from Buffalo, New York. So, with such a busy stretch of track, what would we be able to see? There were a lot of people wandering around, and although no one bothered me or threatened me or anything, this place just kind of gave off a weird vibe. I wouldn't say I was necessarily scared to be there. I didn't really feel unsafe. I just felt like I needed to constantly be watching my surroundings while holding hundreds of dollars worth of camera and radio equipment. Anyway, I happened to be here in a lull, so there wasn't really a whole lot to see. There's a defect detector about a mile east of here, although the NS detectors on here aren't the most detailed.
Norfolk Southern, milepost 420.6, track 3, no defects.
I always get spoiled by how much the CN detectors read out. The only train I managed to catch was Norfolk Southern B23, a weekday turn from Elkhart to Goshen and back to Elkhart. However, the pleasant surprise was located behind the locomotive. Locals are pretty much the only place you can still find a caboose anywhere other than in storage or a museum, and this one has clearly seen some things. From what I can read, the caboose is a regular on this train and is one of two based in Elkhart. It uses the freight leads to access the yard. Although I don't have any video of it, on the way home I had plenty of time in Friday rush hour traffic to listen to a CSX train calling signals on the old B&O main line through northwest Indiana.
CSX 7015, clear Webster, clear 215, east 2, B158 mile.
I can't quite pull the symbol out on this one at the end, so I don't know where it was going, but you wouldn't be able to see it either, so it doesn't really matter. Also heard was an impact detector, which is used to detect flat-spotted or otherwise defective wheels.
CSX impact detector, milepost 219.4, track 1 westbound. No defects. Repeat, no defects. Total axle count 4, 0, 0, impact detector out.
This is different than a hotbox detector used to find overheating wheel bearings, or a dragging equipment detector used to find, well, that one should be obvious. And with that, we are back home. Of all the places I visited, Durand was easily my favorite. You can get within feet of the tracks legally, and the ATCS monitor display in the station window helps determine whether you're wasting your time or not. And the sight lines, especially to the east, are excellent. I also recommend Nick's Hometown Grill on the main strip of town opposite the station. I got a chicken Caesar salad that was excellent, large, and very reasonably priced. The Michigan State campus in East Lansing is also a good spot, although I would have liked to head over to the Amtrak station and never had a chance to. Elkhart is an excellent spot and the traffic levels are much better, but something was just off about it. I'm not saying that I wouldn't give it another chance, I'm just saying that I didn't necessarily feel the safest here all the time, at this particular time. I think it was the grove of trees to the west of me that I could hear music coming from. I felt like someone was going to come out of those. The New York Central Museum is definitely worth seeing once though, and I didn't get that feeling over there. If you like this video, hit the like button, and leave a comment with your favorite place to watch trains. You can follow me on Instagram at NEIL Railfan, and you can read my blog at the Northeastern Illinois Railfan.wordpress.com. I'm working on a couple different things for the blog that I'll hopefully have out soon. Until next time, stay safe, and thank you for watching the Northeastern Illinois Railfan YouTube channel.